Hey guys, welcome to the Scholar Online YouTube channel, the channel that is all about learning. Today we're going to continue where we left off last week. We are doing lecture 4 in this tutorial series where we are building our own ChatGPT application from scratch using the OpenAI API and Python Django. So I'm going to be showing you in this tutorial series how to build a software as a service platform. It's going to include authentication, it's going to include user profiles. Probably towards the end, it's also going to include pricing and how to charge people for your services. By the time you finish this tutorial series, you would have been able to build your own software as a service platform that is using the OpenAI API. I'm going to try and touch on all the important points as we go along. So far, we are in lecture 4. We've already done quite a bit. So if you're just catching up with us, we try to develop this tutorial so that it can stand alone. But in all honesty, for you to really follow along, you want to be able to see what we've already done before. So I would highly suggest when you have the time to go and watch lecture 1, lecture 2, and lecture 3 of this series so that by the time you're in lecture 4, you can catch up even with respect to the coding and everything that we have done so far. But let's get through the administration first. Remember to like this video, okay? You will find the like button at the bottom of the video. There it is. Just click on it and say like this video. And if there's anything you don't understand, by all means, leave me a comment in the description below underneath the video, right? And if you click on the description of the video, it will extend and you'll find that there is much more information. So I will link the previous videos or the previous lecture tutorials in that description over there. I will link any useful websites that I'm going to be talking about. So if you hear me saying I'm going to put it in the description below, you'll find those useful websites there as well. And I will also link the GitHub page where the code will be available. Although it's a private page, you probably have to talk to me about getting access to it because we need to control as well where this code goes. But I also have timestamps in there, guys, because some of the videos can be long, so I've got timestamps to help you navigate through the videos. And of course, my contact information is also available there. So the description box, very, very useful. Open it up and see what's available there for the video that you're watching. Okay, so let's get straight to the point. Today I'm going to be talking about function calling. Function calling is one of the most exciting updates that OpenAI has come up with since the release of ChatGPT. Honestly, when I first saw the email come through about 2 weeks ago, I was excited. But when I actually dug into it and started writing code around it, I was completely blown away. I think they're not really hyping the functionalities and the improvement as much as they should, probably because they probably overhyped ChatGPT 4 when it first came out with all the features. They said it would have images and all of those things, and it didn't have all of that. So I think they're sort of like taking it low. It was just a very low-key intro, email that came out. There wasn't a whole lot of attention around it, but I'm telling you, when I started digging into the function calling, I was blown away. And by being blown away by OpenAI at this point feels impossible because you're already so blown away, and then you get blown away again. All right, so this is really, really exciting. So let's get right into it. I'm gonna get into the pricing a little bit later because they've also reduced drastically their model pricing. But before we get into that, let's think about what's function calling and what is the application of it. Obviously, function calling is very much related to OpenAI plugins because the way they implement plugins on ChatGPT, I believe they sort of use the function calling functionality in the background. But I think when you're building your own implementation using the API, you probably won't be able to connect directly to those plugins as they are on ChatGPT, but maybe you can connect to your own APIs. So the idea is that they're going to make OpenAI API a little bit more intelligent, because currently what happens is you give it a text input and it gives you a text output. So you put in there, what is the price of Bitcoin or whatever it is you want to ask it, give me this Django code or whatever. And then it outputs you a text in exactly trying to answer the question that you've given it. But function calling now allows you to define specific functions. So what you can do, you can say, okay, this is the question that I've got, but the response that you give me, if you pick up a certain intent in the question, I want you to organize a response in a JSON format. So what it does is, for example, if you're going to ask it, what is the price of Bitcoin today, you could build in a function that says, if somebody asks about the price of Bitcoin, please output very specific information from extract certain information from that question and output it to me in a JSON format. Because once you get a JSON format, you can now programmatically use that JSON into something else, a secondary API or something like that, and then return to the user something very, very specific. I know it's very hard at first, because it took me a while also to wrap my head around it, and we are going to demonstrate in this video exactly what it is that we're talking about here. And the nice thing about the function calling is that you can have multiple functions. So the normal ChatGPT will work as it normally does, but you can add a function into it. You can even have multiple functions. You can even have a function that connects it directly to the internet, because now you can integrate it with Google API. And if somebody asks something that is very, very for example, that needs real life data, you could get the function to pull out that quote, that intent from the question, and give it to you back in a JSON format, and then you can write an automatic code to the Google API, for example, and run that API call, and then get an actual up-to-date response from the internet, which you can put back into ChatGPT again and say, okay, now this is a response from the internet. Can you now answer that question with the response? I mean, it's like amazing what you can do with it. The functionalities are just mind-blowing. And the thing I love the most, and this they don't even talk about in this whole blog, like, I've read the email, but this is just something I picked up with a new model. It is way faster. ChatGPT 3 was fast enough. I mean, I'm talking about the API now. I'm not talking about on the website. ChatGPT 3.5 was pretty fast. And then you had GPT-4, which was way slower. Personally, I never even implemented GPT-4 in my use cases because of how long it used to take to answer very specific questions. GPT-4 was very, very slow. I think it's because of the extra added, variables that they've added and all the different, because they've made the model bigger. So obviously it took longer to process. GPT-4 was very, very slow, right? And now with this function calling, I'm amazed how quick it is. It is like more than half the time that it takes to do a normal GPT 3.5 call. You will see that like the speed of it was just mind-blowing. And they don't talk about it here, but that was one of the things I picked up because I'm very hands-on with these APIs, because I build a lot of code and a lot of programs on this API. So I'm sort of very keen. I almost know in the sense of in the back of my head, even as I wait for the API response, I can even tell you based on the question that I asked how many seconds it's gonna take to give me an answer. And I'm telling you, the speed has improved considerably. So I'm going to link this in the description below, so you can go through this and read about some of the things they talk about. So they talk about the function calling is a very specific model that you can be able to call now, and then you can add your functions, and I'll show you exactly how to do it using the documentation. And then they also talk about the pricing. So that's really, really cool. So now what they've done is that the pricing is much, much lower. I remember with the embedding model, especially when you want to do your talk to PDF and all of those things, the embedding model was quite expensive because you have to embed the text into the embedding model and use that to be able to answer your questions. And it used to embed almost every single response. It was quite expensive. Now they've reduced the embedding model by 70%, the cost of it. So that is like, I was just excited. I'm excited about that. The other thing that is also new is the size of the model. So now you have access to a 16K model. The current model is 4K, which means it's a 4,000 token model. This is a problem because a lot of the times people love, like I've seen on my applications, people want to copy and paste an entire page so that they can ask questions. And then you find that the tokens exceed that 4,000 tokens, and then you get a response, your response gets cut in the middle. And I used to get questions, why is my response getting cut in the middle? It's because the number of tokens are finished, and then you almost have to say continue to continue getting the response. So now you can use the 16K model, and the 16K model is 4 times the current 4K model. So you can those characters on a 4K model or the 16K model is amazing. So the improvements, to summarize it for you, very, very exciting. Number 1, function calling, which I will demonstrate to you. Number 2, the pricing. Number 3, the speed of the model. It is way faster. And number 4, you can now do a much bigger function, like much bigger content and context. You can get up to 16K using the 16K model. So enough talking, let's get right to it. This is a coding platform, not a chat platform. So this is what we've built so far. Let me check if my server is running. So for example, you can ask it something like, I don't know, what is the price of Bitcoin? And ask ChatGPT, and it will take a bit of time, and it will respond to you with the price of Bitcoin. It will tell you that I do not currently have the price of Bitcoin. Obviously, with the functions now, if you wanted, you could actually build a function that talks to the internet and is able to answer a question like this that ChatGPT would not be able to answer, right? But maybe we'll do that in the next video. Let's focus on a basic function today. So for that, let's go into the documentation, and I will link the documentation for you in the description below. Let's go into chat completions. So chat completions, we've done this. This is already what we've been building in our application. So if you look at our AI engine over here and the get chat response function that we built last week, this was the original function that we built. So this function over here is exactly the same as what you see here. You see the completion, you see the model that you're picking, 3.5 turbo. You're gonna see the messages, which is a list of objects describing, a system message, a user message, or previous assistant messages, and so forth. So this is just this code over there. What we did last week was that we upgraded this a little bit so that it can remember previous conversations. So what we did, we created, because we built this in Django, we used Django to now create models that we were able to save each and every single question that get asked by user. So if a user asks something and the thing responds, we are able to save this conversation, for example, in the database, so that every time we can remember what was said before, so you can have a flowing conversation. It's very, very important to have a flowing conversation. So this is what we did make last week. This is where we record the message in the database. So what we're going to do today, first of all, we're going to create a function that we're going to call generate chat function chat generate function response, and it's going to have a prompt. Is going to have a prompt. Okay, so we're going to just build it, and we'll build the messages in here. And if you just scroll a little bit down, or you click on function calling, you will see the different function calling. So first of all, these are the models that are available. Okay, so you've got 3.5, and then you've got GPT-4. I hardly ever use GPT-4. GPT-4 is way more expensive, is a little bit more expensive than 3.5, and it's a little bit slower. And 3.5 is very capable. 3.5, in fact, the new improved functionality with the functions, I know they've added the functions, and they don't talk about it in here. They sort of allude to it by saying function calling, we're announcing updates including more steerable API models, calling capabilities, longer context, and lower prices. They don't even talk about the fact that the model itself, even if without the function calling and the lower prices, the model is also way better. Like, the model performs better in answering questions. I noticed that. So asking a specific question, you can even test this. You can try Turbo 613 and try the old Turbo, ask the exact same question. You will see the difference in the responses. It is definitely been improved even in the way it answers even in basic questions, and it's faster. It's just amazing. So this is the function model that we're going to have to use. So you can copy this model over there, and I'm just going to put it here next to a hashtag so that I remember. So I'm not going to use the GPT-4 definitely. All right, and then there is this one as well. All right, GPT 3.5 table 613. Is this the same? I think this is the same. This is the same thing. Yeah, this is the same thing. All right. Okay, this is the same thing. So this is the same model. There is the 16K model, which I think they'll talk about it a little bit at the bottom here. Okay, they're not talking about it in the documentation, but this would be very, very important. I don't know why they would not mention it in the documentation, because the 16K model is the model that it has like a longer functionality. But let me get the model name from here, because I think it will be there in the blog. All right. So here it's just the turbo one and the 301. The 301 is because what they're saying is, if you want, because there's people that maybe they've steered their prompt engineering very specific to the old 3.5 turbo, and they just want to continue using the 3.5 turbo. All right, especially if you haven't updated your code, because the 3.5, the code is slightly different because it has the functions thing at the end. So let's say you haven't updated your code and you want to just continue using the 3.5 turbo. I think by the end of the month it won't exist anymore, but you can now just rename it and use this 301, and then the 301 will be the old turbo. So if for some reason you just want to use the old model, you can call this, but then they still give you until September, I think, when I read this, to update your code. So they're not gonna host it for much longer, but they will host it for people who have already maybe built applications on it, and it's gonna take maybe a couple of months for your entire development team to catch up with things like that. So you can now call the 3.5 turbo 301, and then you will be able to use it until the end of September or so, and then after that it will cease to exist. So if you had very specific functionality, I would suggest that you start working in the new one, because they won't support it forever. Right, so the function calling is the one that uses 613. That's the one that I've got over here. I just wanted to copy the one with the bigger one, the 16K. There you go. So this is the 16K one. The 16K, I think, cost as much as the old. It cost as much as the old. So this was the price for the old 3.5 turbo, because the old 3.5 turbo has gone down by 25%. Oh no, so this is a little bit more. So the 16K model will cost you more. So when you're building code, you're going to have to think about when you want to use a 16K, when you want to use this, and how much it's going to cost you and things like that. Personally, in my application, I will just limit the text input that users put in. You can even put a control in place to make sure that people do not put in extra long content. You can count the words, and you can give the user feedback and say, well, or you can even manage this form, like where they put in the things, and you can put in a limit of how many characters people can put into the form, so that you can manage the number of tokens people are adding into your application, so you can manage your cost, because you actually get charged per number of tokens. And I've seen, I build these applications for a living. I've seen people copying and pasting entire books and stuff, like trying to paste an entire 5 pages into the ChatGPT to ask it questions and things like that. And for that, you'd rather use the embedding model for it, But so you might want to think around limiting the text. I would only use this where absolutely necessary, right? Because it is a bit more expensive. So we are going to be using this 613 going forward. So let's continue. So they have a very nice example of the code for this. All right. And this code actually, I think they've updated it because it had some problems over here. When this came out, actually it had errors, and I looked at it a couple of days later. They had updated it, fixing those errors. I just want to make sure that they got the arguments. Yeah, they did. So if you can get the arguments like that, then you can get, okay, cool. So let's the first thing that you need to define is something called functions. All right, functions is an array. If you look over here, it's an array similar to messages. So if you look over here, you have messages. This is a list of objects of the previous conversations and the question that you're asking appended to it. Now, next to messages, you'll add a new variable called functions. Functions is also an array. It's an array of JSON objects, and these objects describe the function in great detail, okay? So let's, over here, define functions as a list, all right? And then after we've defined functions as a list, let's then build this object. Let's just copy this object over there and say function object obj is equal to, let's paste it, all right? And maybe let's remove that so that this, so that the object comes out. Yeah, that's much better. so that it's aligned to the left. Okay, so this is an example that is provided in here, but we're going to write a different function. I'm going to do something very exciting. I'm going to try and write a function that calls, I'm going to write two functions for you. No, let's write one function. Let's see. What's an API that we can call? Very nice API. A very nice API that's a free API. Should have thought about this before the video so that it's straightforward. But I need to also think around APIs that are free and all. Okay, so let's call the Google API. Okay, let's call the Google API the Google Search API. All right, so we're gonna call the Google Search API, which is an API that you can get access to. I can show you how to do it. Google Search API. I'm not going to go into the details of getting the API key because that's going to take us too long, and I will assume that you can read the documentation and figure it out and get your own API key. Otherwise, you can call any API. Whatever I demonstrate here, you can use with any other API once you figure out exactly how I got it to work. I'll show you all the steps and you can then apply it with any other API. But also, I'll show you how to call an API, and then I'll show you how to do like database within Django so that you can save information in the database and recall it later. So let's see how far we can get with the API, and then once we're done with that, I'll give you another example for functions, maybe where we save something inside the Django database. All right, so let's call this search. What is it? Current search. Let me call it current internet search. Current internet search. Okay, or get internet search. Okay, all right, let's call this get internet search. So get the current weather given the location. Sometimes when you see like an API example, it's important to also try and get the intent out of it, because I also had to like work this through the documentation. So what do you see when you read this sentence? It talks about the intent. Someone wants to get something, right? And what it is they want to get, the weather, and then they've provided you a location. So think about even how the example is written, and when you write your own example, try and pull out the intent from the way the example is written, so you can write a very good instruction. If there's anything about that I've learned about OpenAI and ChatGPT, is that prompt engineering and how you write your prompts can make the difference between a really amazing application and a crap application. Okay, so the intent of what the person wants to do, the object in which what the person is doing, and the information that they're going to provide. All right, so I'm going to write at the bottom here and say the intent of the request. All right, the second thing that you need to put in that instruction is the object of the request, and the last thing is the information provided. Right? If you break this thing down, you can break it down into the information provided, the object, and the intent of the request. So let's rewrite this again and think about these three things. What is the intent of the request? What is the object of the request? And what is the information? So the intent, for example, would be to get real-time data from the internet. All right, the object is a string, is data. Let's call it data. Is a string, but it's not just a string data. It is a, let's think about this again. So what do they have here? For the object, they have the current weather. So get. So this is actually real-time data is the object. Okay, so this is the real-time object. So this is get information, and this information, the object itself, is real-time data from the internet, and the information provided is a query, the query or the question. So they'll provide you a question that must give you real-time data that you must get. The intent is to get it. So rewrite this in a very, very smart prompt for an AI to understand. So think around that. So the way I'll do this is I always start the description with, so the intent, this intent over here, right? It should be get, retrieve, edit, update, delete, list. So these are all examples of intents. So somebody might say, please give me a list of all the NBA players of 2021 or whatever, all the NBA MVPs or whatever. Please delete something for me. Please update. These are all intents. What is the user intending to do? So when you're writing functionalities, the way you're going to write your prompt is going to be very, very important. And if you know Django, think about Django CRUD, all right? If you understand Django CRUD, Django is a CRUD engine, right? Create, update, read, delete. Think about these when you think about intents, right? What is the intent? So in this specific case, I'm going to say read. So read is the same thing as get, okay? So I will say get. That is the initial intent that you are trying to do. Get, what is the object that you want to get, all right? We want to get a information. We want to get real-time data. Real-time data, okay? Past the 2021, when was it? September 2021 cutoff. Past September 2021 GPT-3 cutoff. GPT will understand what you're talking about. Get real-time data that is past September 2021 cutoff. So this is the object, right? Real-time data. And then what will the user provide? The user will provide the question or the query, okay? So given the query from user. You can say given the query or just given the query. You don't have to say from user. Given the search query. Search, yeah, given the inquiry, search query or inquiry. All right. So did you see how I wrote this? This is the information provided. This is the object, and this is the intent. So remember that, okay? Then after that, you go down here, and then the parameters don't change any of that. Properties don't change that. Now, these are the things that ChatGPT must extract from the information. So in our specific case, what do we need to extract? What do we need to, for you to be able to do a real-time search, what do you want to extract from the information provided? You want to extract the query, okay? You want to extract the query, right? Because the query is, in this specific case, let me give you an example. When I asked, what is the price of Bitcoin? This should trigger this function, because the price of Bitcoin is real-time data past 2024 GPT-3 cutoff, right? Then what is the search query or inquiry? The inquiry would be the price of Bitcoin, and the intent is to get it. So when someone says what is, they are sort of suggesting that get me something. Oh, you know what I'm saying? So think about that. Think about the AI engine as a machine that you need to explain very specific points to it for it to work as best as possible. So now the query is what it will output. So I want it to put the query for me, right? And then after that, that's the only thing I actually need. The query here will be the query provided, the query question or inquiry, the query question or inquiry. And then here you define the data type as a string. To be honest, I've been waiting for OpenAI to define what other data types they are, and I'm not sure if it's there in the API reference. The last time I checked, I couldn't find the specific data types because I wanted to know, for example, can you ask it to give you a date time object? Can you ask it maybe for maybe you want very specific outputs, right? So far I've only been able to get strings out just because I've never tried all the other data types, just because I couldn't find any specific documentation that explains all the data types, right? So on the function call over there, it shows you the function call, and I just want to see the output, and I don't see that it shows you messages, function call, object, functions. Okay, there you go. The name, the description, the parameters. All right. So they just, I remember the last time I checked it, they just send you to specific examples and so forth. And I think they're trying to make the OpenAI documentation readable, and it is the most readable documentation. But for complex scenarios, you might want them to give you, like, in an API documentation, you want them to explain, for example, if they're going to talk about data types here, and they've already given you in these example type strings, what are the other example data types that are available? Can you ask them to give you an integer data type, in objects and all of that? But I suppose maybe I must go into this JSON schema and have a look. But anyway, for now we'll just deal with the string, and that's a description. And then over here, this is the unit. This is the next data type, but we don't need this. All right. We just need one output, and then here you need to define what's required. What's required is like the minimum amount of information that must be given for you to be able to activate this function call. So this query is required in my mind. If you had, for example, like we're going to do other examples where I'll show you, you might have other variables that it can pull out of the request or out of the question, which are optional. Whether it pulls it out or not, you can still run the function query. Like the example they gave us with the weather, calling of a weather API, they are, there is the location and the units, but the units are optional, and you can see over here, the data type, they've got a data type of an enum. So this would be like a drop down menu if you got like options whether people must, that you want to give it to one of these two options. So they've defined an enum data type and a string data type, but I also would have been interested to see other ones. And then here's a function over there, right? So I'm going to just copy this response and paste it. Let's see, that's the object, right? And then let's paste the response. So let's copy these strings over here. So when you look at the documentation later, you can see what I've written there. I won't delete it from the documentation. I'll leave it there for references. Then so you do the chat completion, and then this is the model that we talked about that we're going to use, which is this 3.5 turbo 613. And messages is messages. So we need to define the messages, and then we need to define the functions. Like I said, the functions is this a list, but it's going to be a list with a function object in it. And you can have multiple functions, by the way. You can define multiple functions, and we will do that later on. But let's just start with one basic function, right? So let's then just say functions append this function object, so that we can append this object into the function. Okay, so let's append this function object. What this does is that it adds this object into the list. So now you'll end up with a list of these objects, right? And then now you can say functions is equals to functions over here. So this functions is that functions. But of course, you also need to define your messages, all right? So let's start with the messages at the top. Messages is an empty list, and messages are simple. We've done messages before. This is what messages look like. You need to have a system message and a user content message or whatever. So for now, I'll just stick to two. I'll stick with the system message. All right, so let's do a system message and say you are a helpful assistant. Let's just leave it at that, and then let's define a user message. Right, so let's say user MSG is equals to that. And the user message is gonna be the prompt. So this prompt over here, whatever the person asks, is what will go in here. Okay. And then we will messages append. We append this user message. So then what you know what append does in Python? I'm assuming that we are not Python beginners here. You will have this list of an object, and then it will append. It will just add this to that, this object to the list with the prompt, and you can define the prompt here in the definition of the function when you initiate the function. And the prompt can be any question that is related. So you are a helpful assistant built with functions. I don't think that's important to say. Let's just say you are a helpful assistant. Let's leave it at that. Let's not make it too fancy. You can make this system messages very, very fancy if you want, but we're going to leave it very simple. So then you have messages defined. So when you say messages is messages, it will know exactly what you need over there. And function call auto is the default, but let's just leave it the way that it is. And then we can get the response. All right. And over here, you can see in the response, you can have a look at the response. You can say the response message is this response message over here. It's going to be the response choices 0.message, and you can then check if there is a function call in here. So let's actually like run this, right? And print this message, right? Let's run this in the shell and print this message and see what this message will look like. So we want to see, because what functions does, right? This is the functions itself is not going to do the API call to the Google or whatever it is. The function is going to look at the prompt that the question that the user is asking, the prompt that is being provided, or the question that the user is asking, the question that is being fed to the ChatGPT, and it's going to analyze that question, and it's going to look at your functions, and it's going to try and figure out if in any of your functions you can activate any of your functions based on the prompt that has been given. And if it can activate a function, like if you have this as auto over here, then it will automatically, instead of responding with text, because normally it used to respond with text, it will now respond with a JSON object, which will be structured according to the properties that you've given it. So the properties here, you can say, I want the query, I want the date, the time, whatever it is that you need to define based on the question. It will give you these properties. It will return these properties in a JSON format, so that you can now get the specific query in here, and then you can call your API call, which is the Google API call, because now you know for a fact that the intent of the question is a real-time Google call. And after you know for a fact that it's a real-time Google call, you now even know the specific query that you need to input into Google based on what the user has asked. So then you will then get the question from there, and then you will put it into the Google call. So over here somewhere, we will extract that query, and then we will call the Google API with a query, and then we will get the answer from the Google API, and then we will send the answer back to the user that we've gotten via the Google API. We can even have a second function and say, this is the answer we got from the Google API. This is the question the user has asked. Can you modify this answer properly so that it's in the nice format like the way you would have been? You know, like there's a lot that we can do with this right now, but for now let's just have a look that the function gets activated if we ask a specific question. And if we don't ask a specific question that is real-time data, like we ask an old question, that the function does not get activated. You understand? So let's just test that for now. So I need to just like push my changes, just bear with me. All right, let's refresh this. We've Oopsies. Just bear with me. I'm just trying to get back to where I was. Yeah. Let's just list here and see what is the env in here. Oh, it's called env. I'm just trying to activate the env and then cd back to the working directory, and we've pushed the changes. So this is our and then we need to now, we want to run the shell. So I'm going to run this function in the shell. So I need to explain something to you. If you're watching this for the first time and you haven't worked with us with Django before, you can call a Python shell by saying Python, and this is a Python shell, right? You can import time. Import time, whatever. This is a function shell, a normal shell, but you cannot import. If I want to import user, for example, right? I cannot import user in here because it's just a normal Python shell. I need to actually call a Python shell within the Django context of this current application. You understand? So when I want to run a code on the shell, I actually need to say Python manage.py shell. This is now the Django shell, where if I call the user model, it will be able to import, because otherwise even calling settings and things like that doesn't work, or any Django related things don't work in a normal Python shell, even if you're in the environment. You understand? So this is very important, because being able to call functions in the command line is very, very important, especially when you're still building your application, because sometimes you want to write a function, right, like over here, and then you just want to test it as you go along. Like you want to test the little bits of the function and you want to just run it in the shell. You want to just run the function, give it a prompt and see what happens. Especially sometimes when you're problem solving and you've got errors and you just want to test one bit of, just run one little part of the function. So running functions in a Python Django shell is very, very important that you know how to do that, and you know the difference between calling manage.py shell and just calling Python. So now we want to call this function, and this function you can see is in a file called AI engine instead of profile. So we have to import this file. So we need to say from profile, what is this called? Profiles. So from profiles is the name of this folder. I'm just importing this to the shell where I am, okay? So from profiles.ai engine, AI engine is the name of the file, AI engine.py. Okay, I just want to import this function because I want to test this function in the shell, right? Import. Otherwise, you're going to have to retype all of these things in the shell, which you don't want to do. You can just import this, right? And after you've imported this, you can just define a prompt. And then you want to see. So let's just check that the normal ChatGPT works, right? Like, let's not ask now anything internet related. So let's ask something like, what is 1 + 1? Doesn't need to search the internet to tell me what is 1 + 1, right? You've got in the prompt. Let's call the thing. It should return the normal, content. It's still an object, because normally what we would have done, we would have said .content. Like this, the way we have it over here. So we would have said, where is it? Generate ChatGPT response. There it is. We would have said response choices 0 message.content. So we would have said response 0 messages.content. So you can see over here what we are calling is ChatGPT 0.messages. So over here we would have added the content, and then we would have gotten just this text, 1 + 1 = 2. So it still can call the normal ChatGPT the way the normal ChatGPT works. But now we want to ask a very specific question about Bitcoin, where it would have returned this response, right? Normally it would have returned this and told you, hey, actually I access the internet, I don't know, I'm an AI model, I don't know what is the current price of Bitcoin, right? Because that is what it would have done normally. But now, instead of doing that, let's say it should now actually activate the function and give us a query, which at least we can now see, oh, this person actually wants to search the internet, this is their query, and we can go actually search the internet, okay? All right, so let's run the function again, generate response. This time we should get a function response, right? Oh, text, I need to say text, sorry. So prompt, it's still working on 1 + 1. So prompt is equals to what is the price of Bitcoin? All right, and then let's run that, generate with a prompt. There you go. So now content is null, because before, remember, you used to have the content 1 + 1. There's no content. Instead, there's a function call. There wasn't a function call before. Now there's a function call with arguments. And this arguments is the query, is the only argument that I wanted. And the query is the current price of Bitcoin. You see? So this is now very, very powerful. Now, and the name of the function that was activated is get internet search. This is the name of the function, which is this function over here. So now, instead of it returning a content, it returns a JSON object with the specific variables you have defined that you want, so that you can now take these variables and go. So this is not what's going to call the internet. You are going to call the internet via your own API, but now you have picked up the intent from the user, that the user actually has a call internet intent. So now you know that's what the user wants for sure, because you couldn't have called the internet every time someone asks a question. Because every time someone asks a question, you can't, how else would you have known that you need to call the internet? Right? The only way for you to know that you need to call the internet is now that you have these functions that you can pick out the intent and actually pick out the query. Now you know, in this specific case, if I get this function, this person wants to search the internet, let me get my internet API, search the internet and give them a response. You understand? That's how functions work. Now we know the function intent. So what we need to do is that we need to get this object, we need to get the function call, right? And then from the function call, we need to get the arguments. Luckily, in the documentation over here, they've already written this code for us. Let's have a look there. So the first thing you need to do is if there's a function call, okay? So if response.get function call, it means it tells you, it will tell you if there is a function call in here, right? If response message get function call, because in the other case you can see there was no function call. So this will fail if there's no function call. All right, so continue with this, and else of this you can do exactly what you used to do before. So what you used to do before was what we did over there. You can say the answer is this, but now that we have called the function, we now know that we need to do something else. We need to now deal with this function, get the variables out of the function. So we need to get this argument, and then we need to get this query, arguments.query. So they've written this for us over here in the documentation. The arguments are JSON.loads that function arguments, right? So let's paste that in there. So for now, there's only one function, right? If there's multiple functions, you're going to have to do something else, and we will update this code when we have multiple functions. For now, I know for a fact that I only have one function. So if a function was activated, it's the only function that I've added that was activated. So I don't need to do tests to figure out which function was activated. But later on, when we add multiple functions, I will show you how to do that, maybe next week tutorial, because I can see this is already going on to 50 minutes. We are not going to be able to call the other function today, right? So once we have the function arguments, we do that, and then let's say I want I don't want the location, I want the query, but we'll just update this with query, because I know now what is going to be in here is the query. The query is going to be function arguments, which is this function args, okay? Is going to be function args get the query. Right. So now we know what the query is. Now we're gonna search response, search response is equals to run internet search with the query. All right, I haven't run the I don't have the the search yet, so but I'm gonna write the function now, a function that runs an internet search and returns. Let's write it right at the top. Okay, this is a function that runs an internet search with a query and returns, it returns, I'm just gonna say the price of Bitcoin is, I don't know, $1,000. This function really doesn't return anything. Like this function right now is just a string, it's a hard-coded string. You run it, you put in a query, it returns a hard-coded string. But of course, we'll write in here a function that actually searches the internet using the Google API, right? But for now, let's leave it like that. And then this search response, let's call it the answer, right? And then we return the answer, right? So now we've updated the function such that it will check if the function was called. And because I only have one function, I don't have to check which function was called. We know it's the only function we have that was called. We get the arguments because the whole point of calling a function is to be able to get the arguments in JSON format that you can use them in another function, in another API call within your own application seamlessly. So this really is going to revolutionize the way we work with the OpenAI API. I'm just excited to see the type of products that are going to come out now, right? So let's save this and test it. And if we ask something very specific about internet information, it should return me the price of Bitcoin. But if I ask any other ChatGPT question, it should actually return me the ChatGPT answer, right? So let's exit out of this. So let's clear this. Let's run our shell. Remember, we need to run manage.py shell so that we can access the Django shell. Then we need to call this file AI engine inside of the profiles thing. So from profiles AI engine import, we want to import this function. Okay, I think I've copied an empty space. Let me just copy it again. What's going on there? Okay, so then let's try and define a prompt. Let's define a prompt that it would answer, what is photosynthesis? What is photosynthesis? And by the way, ChatGPT is so impressive that even if I misspelled what is photosynthesis, it would know exactly what I'm talking about, right? So what is photosynthesis? Let's run this. This shouldn't need the internet to respond, right? Shouldn't need the internet to respond. So let's get an answer of what is photosynthesis. There you go. Photosynthesis is the process in which green plants, algae, So it answered it the way it normally used to answer questions, right? But if I ask now, what is the price of Bitcoin? And I run the prompt, it should call, JSON is not defined. That's my mistake. Import JSON. Right. Let's import JSON. All right, let's exit out of this. Let's clear this. Let's run the shell again from profiles.ai engine. Import this function. Okay, let's run the prompt. What is the price of Bitcoin? All right, and let's run the function. I had forgotten to import the price of Bitcoin is 1,000, but it's only returning this because that's what I put in here. So what we need to do now is actually write a function that is going to call the price of Bitcoin. Okay, so let's do that now. So for you to be able to use the Google Search API, you're going to need the Google API Python client. I will also link this in the description for the video, but just copy this over there, pip install Google API client, and then go to your VPS, whatever, and type it in wherever it is that you're going to be running this, and then it will go and install the client. All right, so once you've done that, clear, and then you're good to go. So I'm not going to try, and I'm not going to go into the details of the code for you because I will link for you where you can go find the code. So this is the Google API GitHub page, and on the Google API GitHub page, this is a very interesting website to always have inside of your bookmarks. I think I need to bookmark this as well. It has a lot of the API sample codes. Okay, so analytics, calendar, compute, and a lot of the useful ones, AdSense and so forth. Plus storage. So a lot of the API sample codes you'll find in there, and underneath there is the custom search API code. So if you go in there, you will see Google APIs, Google API Python client, and then you go into the custom search and you go to the main.py for the custom search. Very, very simple code. It's actually just two lines of code. The first thing that you need to do is obviously import the Google at the top. You need to Google API client discovery import. So I've done that for you over here. From Google API client discovery import build. But before you can import this, you need to install this library first. So this is important, but it's very simple to install. Once you've installed that, then you need to import this. That's pretty much all you need. But before you can even get started with that, when you call the Google API, just like any other API, you need an API key. So you need to get an API key. And for the Google search engine, you also need what they call like a site CX number or something like that. But it's very simple to obtain. I will also put this in the description for you below. So if you go to this link that I'll put, the custom search API page, if you scroll down there, there's a nice button that you can click there that takes you to how to get your API key. It's a bit of a process, by the way, but if you're used to working with Google APIs, you can easily do it. You click, you're gonna go to the Google developer page. If you don't have a Google developer account, you have to create a new one, and then you need to create an app, and then after you create an app, and then you need to activate the service, and then you get the key. All right, so it's a bit of a process, and it's fragmented how to do it, but just like if you can't figure it out, ask ChatGPT or Google something, or go to Stack Overflow, but get the key. You need two keys. You need this key, and then you need the CX number. And both of them, you can find the instructions on how to do it over here. So what I've done is I've shown you here, you need a CX number, and then you need the developer key. I've saved my ones in my settings.py file, which I'm not going to display to you because I don't want you to see my keys. But once you get your keys, you can either type them here directly. So the Google API key goes directly in here, and then the CX number goes here. The CX number is slightly shorter than the API key. If I look at the documentation here, they don't have an example of it here. You'll see the CX number looks something like this, right? And then the API key is a bit of a longish number, but you just follow the instructions. Before you can proceed, you need to get those two numbers. So once you've gotten those two numbers, you're going to input them into this function here. And it's the same function which I actually copied out of here. You'll see you need to say services build. You build custom search with a key, and then you have this the response is then services, whatever, CSE. So I've written the code here, and it will be there in the documentation. So you first of all, you start by building the service, and after you build the service, then you call the service, right? So you call the service and you put in your query in there, and then you need to put in the CX number, and then you execute, and then you're gonna get an array. So with the Google search, I don't want to spend too much time on this. That's why I'm telling you just from the very top level, because this function could have been any function. I've decided to use a search function because I think this is one of the most common applications of ChatGPT. But you could use any function. This function returns a list, and this list is like a list of URLs and descriptions and sort of like snippets, right? So from my experience working with the Google API, most of the useful information in the search. So if you went and you did a normal search like on the Google page and you said, what is the price of Bitcoin, for example? Like this. What you will get, you see these articles, you get a title. This is a snippet. This is what a snippet is. This is what a snippet is, right? This is what a snippet is. And then a description, you don't even see it here, but the API also returns a description. The description is the page description. So whatever is in the page description is what the Google API returns. But I think the snippet normally is sufficient, right? So I tried to get the description and the snippet, but I think I will actually remove the description and just work with a snippet. Because what I'm doing here is I'm then collecting all the snippets, because it returns all of this information in a JSON list. So I'm able to go into that JSON list and pass just the snippets part of the list, all right? And then put them in one sentence. And then it's going to be one sentence with all of these strings appended into it. And then I can then take that sentence and feed it back to ChatGPT and say, well, provided this information, can you actually now answer the query? You understand what I'm saying? So we're going to do two API calls to OpenAI and one API call to ChatGPT one API call to the Google API to be able to answer one live question. Understand? But so far, let's see how that would work. So then we're going to get the snippets and then we're going to return the content, okay? So let's actually test this function, right? Let's put in a query and test that the actual search functionality works. Then once we know the search functionality works, then we can now actually integrate it back into our original API call to be able to answer the question, right? So let's save this. All right, let's go into shell. Let's call the functions from profiles.ai engine import everything. For now, let's just do that because I don't know the name of the thing. Let's now search the price of Bitcoin, right? What is the price of the Bitcoin? All right, what is the price of Bitcoin? We don't know what it is. Let's Google it, right? Let's Google it via API. And now we are collecting just the snippets. So basically what we're doing is that the API is now just doing a search and just collecting all these article snippets in one long paragraph. So from what it could find searching the internet, this is what it found. Obviously, I can't give this to the user and say, well, I can't return this back to the user, So I can use the AI again to now analyze this text, right? And give me the actual price of Bitcoin from this text, or whatever it is that the person is sort of asking. So what I'm going to do now is, let's write this quickly. So let's copy that. And over here, the answer is equals to that instead of that. But we're not going to return the answer, right? We can't return the answer. What we actually want to do is do another API call, okay? Another API call to OpenAI, because we need to sort of refine the answer into a proper response for the user. And we can actually use this code to do that. We can even use the old model, right? Or I can write another function very, very quickly over here. because I don't want to use the old model. Now that I've got the new model, why use the old model? I'm going to use GPT 3.5 613 Turbo. And the nice thing about it is you can use it without defining functions, by the way. And it will work just like the old model worked, but it's faster, cheaper, more efficient. It's just amazing. So we can use this without defining functions. We know we're not going to have functions at all, right? I'm just going to create messages over here. Let's start by defining a system message that says, you are a helpful assistant. Let me not say you're a helpful assistant. Let us start by saying answer questions based on information provided. Return only the answer without introductory messages or comments. Okay? Answer questions based on the information provided. Return only the answer without introductory messages or comments. Okay? That's the system message that I want to define. Let us define our user message. The user message is not going to be the prompt. We can use an F string. Answer this question given this information. Okay, so basically all you need to give it is a question and the information, right? So this is again just an a chat completion model. We are using the 613 instead of the old 3.5. Even though we're not defining functions, we don't have to define function. We can use it without defining function. It works just as well, but it's way faster. And we're going to define our system message, which is this. We're going to tell it what to do. Do not have any introductory messages or comments. Answer these questions given this information. Do not add any comments. Right? Do not add any comments. And then we need to actually define the messages as an array. Right? As an array. Then we need to append. We need to append user. Oh, okay. No, it's already defined. Okay, so messages is already defined there as a list, so we need to just append that. Cool. So we need to just append this in there, and then once we've done that, we've got our messages here. Then we say that, and then now we can call this, and this is the one that will return the answer that we need to give back to the user, right? So the next API call, this is now the, so let's not call this the answer. Let's call these the Google whatever response, right? And then the answer is now going to be equals to this generate chat response with the question. The question is still the prompt that was initially added by the user. Oh no, the question is this query that, the question is this query that ChatGPT initially extracted for us, and the Google response is the information that's going to be used to answer this query, right? And then that's what we return. That's what we return. Right? So now when somebody asks what's the price of Bitcoin, check what we're doing here. The first thing, we are calling the OpenAI chat completion using the functions and the functions model, and we are getting a response. But that response could have a function call, and we check if there's a function call. If there's no function call, we just return the text as is. If there's a function call, we only defined one function, so we know that's the only function that has been called. Therefore, we're going to get the query because that's what that function describes. This function is written to do a real-time search. It's not really written to do a real-time search. It's written to actually extract an intent for a real-time search from the user question. So it looks at whatever the user has typed and says, well, is this person looking for a real-time internet search? Yes, they are. What is their query? Then it pulls out that query and it gives it to you. Then you take that query and you do the internet search with your own API in the background. So you call your API and then you get the response from your API, and then you get the content from that. But that content is disorganized. This is one long paragraph. You can't give the user that paragraph. So you take that content and you put it back into ChatGPT and you say, this is the content I got from the API. This is a query or question. Can you check this content that I got from the Google search and answer the original question now? Because you couldn't answer it before because it was past your training. Now I'm giving you the real live information. Use that real live information to answer the question. Then you check the answer and then you print out the answer. You understand? So we're doing quite a bit here, but I love the function calling. It's a little bit faster. It will take a bit of time to do a real-time call because it's 3 API calls, but maybe it's just as long as the old calls used to take, right? So let's test this. All right. Let's exit out of this. Let's clear this. From functions, what is it? From profiles, AI engine, import everything. Let's define a prompt as what is the price of Bitcoin. Right, what is the price of Bitcoin? And then let's call this function now, right, with the prompt. So this takes a bit of time. What would be nice is to give the user, there you go, the current price of Bitcoin is 29. I don't know if this is true because this is what it's doing. So now it's answering the price of Bitcoin. Let's ask something else because this is very, what happened with Harry and Meghan Markle, you know, involving a car chase. This is something the old ChatGPT wouldn't know because it happened just like within the last month, right? But now it should be able to hopefully pick up the intent and do an internet search, and if we've written our prompt properly. And you see, now my question, I'm not even saying what is the current. I'm not using any words like keywords like current, which would suggest I want you to find me current information. I'm just asking a question like I would have normally asked a question. A user would have just asked, oh, what happened with the car chase, right? If you had asked the old ChatGPT, it would have said, I don't know, right? But now with this current ChatGPT, now that it has access to the internet, it actually remembers in 2023, May, there was an incident after the Women Vision Awards. So we have just amped our ChatGPT game where now ChatGPT is able to answer actual current questions. So let's just do this very, very quickly and update our current model, right? I'm going to try and save time and I'm going to give you the homework to do this. Remember, we still have to involve the conversation, right? So you can still integrate this remembering of conversation with the user and whatever prompt, but I'm not going to do this because it's going to take time. I'm just going to copy that into our views, and where we used to call functions, All right. And where we used to call functions, where is it? Dish. So over here, whatever we used to do here, right? I'm just gonna highlight that out, and then I'm going to say answer is equals to that, generate functions with the prompt, and the prompt is obviously there. And let me just see what we are importing at the top. From AI engine, import everything, right? From AI engine, import everything. And then we're going to say, okay, so generate whatever, and then we're just going to say the response, it needs to be an object, I remember that much, and it needs to be an object with the answer. So it needs to actually just be this, it needs to be that. So you can just do that. So response answers generate prompt, and then return the answer like that. So I'm just highlighting that out, but actually what you want to do is to update this function that we wrote last week, because this function now records the previous conversation and things like that. So that if, for example, you ask, so that it remembers what you asked previously. But this is your homework, okay? Next week I would have done it in the background, or maybe I'll show you quickly how to do it. But it's very, very simple. I mean, all you need to do is to get the records and append the records, and then call the thing the way you would have normally called it. So actually, we can just let's see. Okay, so the messages get built in here, right? Let's see the messages. We need to build the messages over here. Yeah, so you need to do a bit of work to figure out how to update that, but you have enough information that from what I've done for you, you should be able to figure it out. Okay, so let's do this. Update the main function. This is your homework. The lecture is getting a bit long, so we will let you do this at home to update the function which records what people have said, and then we'll continue from there next week. Okay, so now we're just going to run Python manage server. So now we're actually running it on the website. Cool. So let's go back to our website and just remember it. The last time I asked it what is the price of Bitcoin, and it couldn't tell me the price of Bitcoin. So now we're going to refresh this, and we're going to say, yeah, what happened with Harry and Meghan Markle car chase recently. Yeah, let's not even use the word recently. Car chase. All right, let's ask ChatGPT, and we are hoping this will now activate the functions and that it will be able to answer this question. So now to compare that, this is actually a plugin that is something that this is exactly what the plugins are, but now we are building them into our own API and building our own plugin to be precise. Let's go and ask the normal ChatGPT, right? The normal ChatGPT, I can't copy this. What happened with Meghan and Markle's car chase? Okay, so let me go to the normal ChatGPT and ask it, what happened with Harry, Meghan Markle's car chase. Okay, if you ask the normal ChatGPT, it's not going to know. It doesn't know the answer. It's past this cutoff, right? But when we ask our ChatGPT, it actually has the answer. You can even ask it, what was the theme for the 2023 Met Gala? What was the theme for the 2023 Met Gala? So this is something that the old ChatGPT wouldn't have known, right? Karl Lagerfeld a line of beauty. Now this is beautiful, guys. Thank you for watching. Next week we're going to continue amping up our application. I thought I would show you another function, but now we're running out of time because this function alone took me an hour 30 minutes. When we come back next week, I will show you another function, because what is really going to blow this thing out of the water is where you can now save data in databases. Let's say people can now create nodes, save. Now you can start building real applications. You know, you can have an actual application that has ChatGPT, but you can have a database in the background where you can save, retrieve, update information in your own database without necessarily calling a third-party API and things like that. So we will continue with that next week, and thank you guys for watching.